Before we get started, there's something I think that have a little moment of silence. Today is D-Day.
Amen.
And I know we all had relatives that fought in that war. I had an uncle who was in the Battle of the Bulge, and an uncle that was in the Navy in the South Pacific. And I was watching it this morning at one cemetery. Almost 10,000 young American boys who died storming the beaches of Normandy. And that's just one of the cemeteries. These kids were 19, 20s, 30s. They never had a chance to live, but they lived long enough to storm those beaches and to free Europe and free us from a tyrant like Hitler. So today is D-Day and November 6th. Right now, if it was going to 75 years ago, it's well underway. I was 5 years old when some of you guys were alive at that time. I know Pete, you were probably, but you're older than Sam. I'm 84! But anyway, just have a little moment of silence for those guys who give up some. Thank you. Anybody got anything you want to talk a little bit about? Anybody at all? I see the president of Carroll College is here, John. Is there anything on your mind you want to refresh us with?
Well, it's summer, believe it or not, and we're thinking about things to do in the summertime. So on Saturday, July 20th, the Symphony Under the Stars at Carroll College. Mark your calendars. It's free. It's been ranked as one of the top 10 symphonies under the stars in the whole country. So mark your calendars. It's going to be a wonderful event. Carroll is off to a great start. We had a cabinet meeting yesterday. Michael, would you stand? Mike is new. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Some of you all were here the last time I was here. Michael McMahon, son of Dr. Jack McMahon, the OB here in town. And then my grandfather was Dr. Jack McMahon Sr., the general surgeon. If you know him, then I hope you still like me. He was a bit of a pull. But it's good to be back home. I've been back in Helena for about a month, and it's a great honor to be back in Helena and then serving Carroll College.
We're so delighted to have Michael with us. And some good news from our cabinet meeting yesterday. Our enrollment for next fall is right now running 26% ahead of last year. So.
Would you like to take that?
No, it's all Michael.
Anybody else got anything? David? Want to get a real contract association?
Yes, sir.
How'd you
Yeah.
do?
We had a pretty good session. Representative Funk helped us out on some bills. We appreciate that. So, yeah, we moved the museum and the Romney Hall off the dime. So, getting some things built around the state. So, I got along just fine with parents of soccer and basketball kids. So the contract is going just well. Thank you.
Are you doing anything with the YMCA anymore, Tom?
Nope. They're on their own and they're doing just fine. Yep.
Good. Anybody else got anything? Oh, come on.
I had a great opportunity to attend the Capitol graduation last weekend. And I don't know if you've been to one of the high school graduations recently, but they are really a well-run show. It was a ton of fun. And I hadn't realized it. You know I'm with Big Brothers Big Sisters. My little brother graduated. I hadn't realized, thank you. What's really important is he's the first person in his family to graduate from high school. So that blew me away. His mom told me she'd never been to a graduation before and I never thought much about it. And then she told me why. So thank you for your support. Thank you Tyler's not here, but when you see him, say thanks to him for a great graduation program. And thank you for your support for Big Brothers Big Sisters. We can't do this without you.
Before you sit down, how's Colleen doing?
How's Colleen doing? Colleen was battling cancer earlier this year. She's still battling, but she's winning.
Good.
Yeah. So she hasn't had to go through the additional steps of the massive surgery that she was fearful of because she's done as well as she has. Treatment should be done in November. And knock on wood. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Leo, there was a car wreck out on Devil's Elbow. Do we have any, what happened down there? Guy got too fast or what?
Well, it was a rather tragic incident. I told the paper that the cause was blunt force trauma, and the toxicology is not back, but we know why, and it's a sad situation. So the alcohol, maybe some drugs were a factor, but it had some high speed. So you take those combinations and they have a disastrous outcome. So it's unfortunate, and I'd like to tell you more, but I really don't have the toxicology back to officially say that.
Was he wearing a seatbelt?
I don't think so because he was ejected from the car. So chances are no. And there's some other circumstances just due to respect to the family that I won't say. There's some special circumstances that can't afflict any one of us. It wasn't a fun deal, but it's unfortunate. So that's the report on that. Good thing we've been hiring. Maybe you want a second career. Maybe some of you a third career. We'll work on that as a detention officer. And we've going to be hiring about probably 33 of them. And by the time the new detention center gets open, we're at about 12. And it's funny how when somebody says, I don't have anything in my background.
What kind of qualifications do you have to have?
That's usually the first indication that you lied.
You're going to see lightning here under your, all right.
Yeah, well, I give them clemency. I say, you'll speak now, forever hold the peace type deal. I didn't think you'd find that. Well, Ray Charles let us do it. No, it's, we're going to get some good people. We haven't been in a real hurry. We're going over quality, over quantity, and think you'll be impressed with the staff. I hope you're impressed with the deputies and the staff now. Last week we were training on the Missouri River with the water emergency team, and for some of you I'll call you rabid fly fishermen. You don't necessarily like us on there with the jet skis, but when the wind's blowing and your boat tips over, we're a welcome sight. So I think the tables turned. I hope you did read the article about Tim Crawford and his son going out and helping. The point of that article was they had no call, they had no obligation to go out and help, but they saw the need and they did. They were just private citizens. They jumped in that big boat. They still had to act courageously, but it was rough scenes. That was the point of celebration of having them come out and help. They really did make a difference. And there was another fisherman that helped in the boat with one of the deputies, and they pulled in. It's unfortunate that one didn't make it. That was the the 3 fishing boats that took off on that ill-fated tour in the morning. When I was at a fire warden's conference, and the nice thing about the radio system is you can listen in and all those kind of things. So quite a few acts of valiant bravery just from citizenry. I think we live in a good community. We have bad things happen, but sometimes I get focused on the bottom 3%, but there's a lot of good people here, and I appreciate that. Any other questions, Jim?
Hey, Leo, how's the jail, the construction?
I believe they're done with the construction. Now they'll start with the construction. We're looking probably about a year out. And we want to time it to where we have everybody hired and trained on the new systems when they put it in there, but they've gutted all of the other stuff. I haven't seen that building empty since 1984 when it was first built. Now they'll start putting in the sections, the direct observation pods, different pods and things like that. And they'll start in the basement. It'll be the first floor, not the basement. And then the second floor will be the housing of dorm style and direct supervision, special, I don't know what to call it, special classification. And then we'll have programming space, something we've never had before. Programming space is something where we can have meetings, we can bring in counselors, we can bring in mental health counselors, we can bring in people who want to help the inmates read. That's something that I think we really need to work with, and I know you get to be the higher education, but I'm the teacher of the lower education. They go out and do the same thing they did, because they just don't have these other skills. And they are there for a while. The people say, oh, they're just there for a very short time. Right now, we're keeping the worst of the worst. So you're looking at a minimum of 6 months. If you get arrested on a felony.
6 months?
Hey, shit! All right.
Go to jail for 6 months.
Hey, Joe?
Yes, sir.
Don't do that, Leo. You're gonna get a heart problem.
Hello, Joe.
Reaching for his firearm.
Get that part out. If he gets a ticket, I'll put AH on there. That's for aggressive and hostile. I don't know where your money But I know I need to watch my back.
Continue on.
What was that?
I'm going to arrest you.
Oh, 6 months. You're in there for quite a while. Yeah. Joe will be in there for at least 6 months. By the time you go through the court process, our longest bed day so far, I was looking the other day, is 2.5 years. So it's just, and that's not our fault. There's continuation, hoping for a better deal. The problem is that keeps our facility plugged up. I will say that the pretrial program is helping. The 24/7 program where you give the breath test twice daily is helping. It gets people out of jail, back to work, and they are sober. I know people will say, well, they can drink anyway, and they drink and then they go take their test. They got to time down. If they could do that, they wouldn't have their second or subsequent DUI. They wouldn't. If they knew how to control their drinking, they wouldn't. So we have a 99% success rate with the twice daily breath test. I'm really a firm believer in it. They pay for it. It's $2 in the morning, $2 in the afternoon. I get, I will use the word chided that I'm making poor people pay. But beer costs more than $2. So that's been my issue, is if you really have to work at it to get off of the program, it lasts longer. That means I go down there and ask, how's the program? Hate it. Good. You having fun? No. But the recidivism rate for the twice daily breath test is substantially lower than any other test. They don't reoffend. It's in their mind that they have to come twice daily. And they do write letters, kind letters. I get other letters that aren't, but these are good. These are kind that say, you know, I was in a rut. Alcoholism is something I don't understand, and they need assistance out of it, and it's the way out. But our roads are safe because they're not.
Provide counseling as well.
Which I,
Provide counseling also for the.
that's a different program. But if they get into we can direct them to a mental health through the Western Mental Health, and if they're having mental health issues, line them up. In the detention center, we do have a therapist that now works there. We line them up to go. They still have to go.
We're gonna get to.
Yeah. We only have one, but we can get two. And that is a big deal, because a lot of people in there, probably 95% have a disorder of some kind, and sometimes a co-occurring disorder, alcoholism, bipolar. These people aren't in where they can control things. So if we get them some help, it reduces recidivism, and that's the idea. So that's the jail.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Anybody else?
Yeah, just not taking anything away from the Symphony Under the Stars, because I've been to it many, many times. However, this year I'm going to be in Butte on the 20th of July for the annual East-West Shrine football game. And every year we host that. I'm a member of the local shrine temple here called Algeria, and it's our Montana East-West Shrine football game. If it's not, it is right up on top of the best fundraising football games in the nation. We raise more money than probably any other state when they do their football games. And we do it throughout the year with different fundraising activities, and the culmination is we bring a lot of those athletes here. There's about 12 from this area, to include, of course, Boulder and Townsend, White Sulphur, et cetera. They're going to be competing in that game. But better news yet is on the 12th of July in Kalispell, we're going to have the official ceremony opening the clinic that the Shrine is now conducting in Kalispell. In other words, we moved our operation, satellited from Spokane to Kalispell, so we can take care of Montana people in Montana, to include athletic injuries. And they're already doing it. It's occurring right now, where the doctors are coming from Spokane to Kalispell to perform the surgeries and all the work that they do in Spokane at closer to home. And they're also going to put one in Missoula. So we're reaching out. There are 22 of these hospitals in the nation, and 2 of them are burn hospitals. So if you know a child, age 0 to 18, that could use help, regardless of the parent's ability to pay, that child will get the best care they could ever possibly get to make their life as best they can. We do bill insurance. We do send bills to people. However, if a family is destitute and cannot pay, that care is provided free of charge to that family. One thing we do in our local temples is we raise funds for what we call the transportation fund. Transportation fund is what we use to help pay for that family's ability to get to the hospital. So no matter what, we erase any issues that will prevent that child from getting the care they need. So please keep these kids in mind. And if you don't want to go see the symphony, and I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to do that, because it's a great evening. But come on over to Butte and watch a great football game. Not all these kids are going to go on and play football in college. Most will. But there are a few that are going to go on and do whatever else with their career. But it's a great football game, and it's a great way to end their senior year.
Thanks, John. Anybody else? Go for it, Andy.
Yesterday was a great day for the community of Helena. The spirit of service was yesterday, and we had the weather cooperated, and over 500 volunteers went out, and they helped clean up the properties for 54 seniors, veterans, and disabled people that can't do this on their own. So it was a great day for that. And also, not to take any wind out of Carol's sail, but enrollment, unfortunately, is up for Head Start, where to qualify, you have to be at poverty level or lower for the family to qualify for those programs. Thank
What
you.
is your enrollment, Andy? What is the enrollment?
Well, last year we were at 236 kids is what we're granted to perform for, but I think we just dropped it down to 12 kids. Because the only way the federal government will let us keep up with inflation and everything else is by limiting the opportunity for kids to attend. Because we always have 50 to 100 kids on our waiting list. And during the course of the year, I think we get up to about 285 kids that go through the program because of the mobility of our population. But the needs is much greater than we can provide. So it's kind of disappointing we didn't get early kindergarten funding in the last legislative session, because that would help a whole lot for a lot of these kids, because as all the studies show, the more you can do for a child to help them on their way at a very young age, the more productive that person will be throughout their lifetime.
Anybody else? Not? Rob?
Good morning. I'm Rob. I'm the adult child of parents who wrestled with addiction. I'm the parent of adult children who wrestle with addiction, and I am an addict in long-term recovery. When I see a group of people gathered this way, I think it's important to start right there. I am pastor of a church called Freedom in Christ, and it's inside Montana State Prison. One of the questions I get asked a lot when I meet people is, so where's your church on the outside? I don't have one. My church is inside Montana State Prison. I'm in there 3 to 5 days every week, do worship services, Bible studies, counseling, pastoral visits, funerals. It's a full-time position. I want to start, how many of you have someone in your intimate circle, your close friends, family, who is or has been incarcerated? And one of the things that I usually do this in churches, and it's funny to watch because the hand will go up, but they're looking around because they want to make sure they're not the only one. But eventually the hands go up, and in just about every group of people that I talk to, it's 10%. 10% of the people in this room have some kind of close relationship with somebody who is incarcerated. In Leo's hotel, or my hotel, or the women's hotel in Billings. The next question I'd like to ask you to think about, who are the people that are inside Montana State Prison? I ask that question, and the responses that I get usually work their way toward bad people or people who've done bad things. But the reality is that every one of the men that resides inside Montana State Prison is somebody's brother or uncle or father or grandfather or grandson or nephew. And they're there not because they're bad. They're not even really there because they did bad things. They're there because they made a bad choice, a dumb choice. Sometimes they felt like it was the only choice they had, but they're there because of the choice. We have been blessed by our Creator with free will. We have the gift of being able to make choices, to make decisions. They're not always made for us, but every one of those decisions has a consequence. How would you like to make a decision and the consequence of that decision was that you would be locked up 24/7 for the next 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, 40 years? I did, trust me, it sucks. I carried paper for 37 years. That means I was on parole on a 40-year sentence. I ran into a lot of obstacles when I tried to reintegrate into society, into culture, into the town and the vocation that I had chosen. And I had the blessing of being a middle-class white boy with a clean record other than my felony. Some of these guys, well, Leo mentioned Dewey's. I don't have the answer for what we do and what we would do better to deal with driving under the influence, alcohol, driving drunk. I just know that what we're doing isn't working. We have guys who are in and in and in. They recidivate. The recidivism rate for DUIs is astronomical. Addicts, the same way. They're in, they get out, they violate, they go back. One of the saddest cases is a guy that I met when I first started in Montana State Prison 7.5 years ago, who was 85 days away from completely discharging the DUI sentence that he got in 1968. A 3-year sentence. I started in 2012. He'd get out, he'd encounter difficulties, self-medicate, get arrested, and go back. When I first started, I met some people involved in re-entry. Mo Wasepka is one who comes to mind, who worked with inmates after they're released back into the community to help them reintegrate back into the community. And I really got into that effort, and I wrote programs, and I visited and made presentations, and I realized I was spending probably 55 to 60% of my time out on the road talking about reentry. But my call is to be the pastor to the men in freedom in Christ inside Montana State Prison. So I leave the reentry to others, and I focus my efforts on working with the men, providing them pastoral care, worship services, being their pastor. About 3 years ago, give or take, I had a conversation with one of the staff at Montana State Prison who is upline from me. I won't say it's my boss because my boss is the bishop. But she said, we have some concerns about your pastoral visits. Say more. Well, other pastors who come in and do pastoral visits, when the guys come to visit, they bring their Bible. Well, that's always a good thing. And I see them studying. They're looking at passages in the Bible. They're writing things down. When they leave, sometimes they leave with homework. My response was, that sounds more to me like a Bible study. I do those 3 or 4 days a week. She said, well, we're not sure it's pastoral. We think that these guys sometimes are just coming to visit. I said, that's probably true. You know what it is that makes it a pastoral visit, don't you? Well, of course. What? I'm a pastor! If we talk about baseball or motorcycles, it's still a pastoral visit because they're visiting with the pastor. That's a rare commodity inside. Somebody you can talk to. We start out talking about the Seahawks, but eventually we work around to my dad, my ex, my kids. And that's the part that is so necessary. About 35 years ago, a man named Ed Nedbalek started a program or a system called Prison Congregations in America. And he came up with this harebrained idea of planting a denominational congregation inside a prison. You have chaplains in many prisons, you have volunteers who come in to do all kinds of things. But if it's a real congregation, you have involvement, you have ownership, you have community. And it's a continual community. It's not somebody who comes in and, as my very first visit at the prison, the guy said, they come in and get us all fired up. Actually, he said they come in and get us all fired up because he was wearing belly chains and handcuffs. And then they leave. His question to me was, I hope you're going to be here. And then I said, that's why we're here. That's what a congregation does, is a pastor is there in the community 7 days a week. At seminary, Ed came and made a presentation about prison ministry to those of us embarked upon the journey toward ordained ministry. And he resonated with me and with another of my classmates, because both of us were convicted felons. And he encouraged both of us to make ourselves available for a call to the then fledgling St. Dismas congregation inside state prison in South Dakota at Sioux Falls. Carl went a different route to chaplaincy and wound up in the federal prison system. As a chaplain, not as an agent. I said, well, I'm going back to Montana. The bishop's already got a church picked out for us. My horses are boarded back there. We're going back to Montana. But if you ever do this in Montana, look me up. Well, he said, that's one of my pet projects, is get a prison congregation inside Montana State Prison. Well, I found out when I got back here, we were making arrangements to get moved in to where we were going to be, and they said, oh, you've got to fill out these papers. And so I filled out, they're called mobility forms. And the last 3 questions on there are, where would you like to serve? What difference does it make? I know where I'm going. I'm going back to Montana. No, you have to fill that out. Okay, well, let's see, Montana. Western North Dakota is like the easternmost county of Montana. That's why I put down Western North Dakota. And then Wyoming, that's pretty much the southern county, so I put down the Rocky Mountain Synod, because that was everything from Colorado north. And Washington is kind of like the western, so I put that. I discovered that if you put North Dakota on your paperwork anywhere, that's where they send you. So instead of this church in Montana that the bishop had picked out, I wound up in North and South Dakota. I was in a little place, Ralph Reeder Bucyrus. I told people it was named after a Confederate general, but Ralph was a community in South Dakota that has the only post office in the country with a playground. That's all they have. Then Reeder is a little town on the border, and Bucyrus is a tiny little town east of there. And I was there for 6.5 years. And then we were ready to make our way back to Montana. And then we went to South Dakota, and then we came back to Montana. Anyway, I never did end up at the church that I was at. It sounds like I'm backtracking, but I went to the seminary. I'm not sure what I expected. Hooded all, some prayer books, I don't know. And what I encountered was one of the most human political communities that I'd ever seen. Well, after all these years of doing that, I got kind of burned out on church politics, and I went on leave from call. We were living in Warden, Montana, and I was driving a school bus and running a hardware store and preaching, supply preaching at every church within 100 miles that had me. And the phone rang, and a colleague of mine from one of the churches that I served up on the High Line said, would you be interested in being called to serve a congregation inside Montana State Prison? I said, sign me up. So in March of 2012, Ed Esselhoff, who had been retired for almost 5 years, came out of retirement to come out to Montana to install me as pastor of Freedom in Christ Prison Ministry. As I said, Montana, he told me years ago, was one of his pet projects. What I didn't realize was I was one of his pet projects too, and he had given Chris my name, and Chris said, I know him, we used to. So, the very first guy that I met at Montana State Prison, I introduced myself. Now, one of the things I do, it happened here when we were introduced this morning. One of the things that has always happened as long as I can remember is I'll go, hi, my name's Rob, and within 5 to 10 minutes I become either Rod or Ron. So I started with this hook to kind of help people remember. And that works out usually like, hi, I'm Rob, like in a bank. I haven't been mean mugged like that since I was in junior high, and I knew immediately why he was there. As I said earlier, these men, these guys, my guys, that's how I refer to them, are sons and brothers and nephews and fathers. And they're just people. I meet people at FISH, that's the Bart's Diagnostic Intake Unit, named after Judy. And that's where guys come in and they learn how to be a prisoner, I guess. They call it FISH because it's like life in a fishbowl. Somebody's watching all the time. And so I go down and I do pastoral visits at FISH, and I meet these fish, these newbies. I say, okay, hi, I'm Pastor Rob. Tell me about yourself. Well, I caught my first beef. No, stop right there. I don't care why you're here. And I get this look of like a deer caught in the headlights. So I want to know where you're from. What do you like to do? What do you do vocationally? What's your family look like? I want to get to know you. And so some of them can't get away from it because their story is so intertwined with their offenses that, well, what I like to do when I'm on the outs, there's a difference. Well, yeah. Some of these guys have been in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, and some of them have been in the system since they were 8, 9 years old. And now they're in their 30s. This is their 4th time back. They've got a kid in Missoula, and they've got a kid in Spokane, and they've got a kid in Great Falls, and they've got and they've got 2 exes and a baby mama. And I hear a lot from people in the community of Deer Lodge. I even hear from other pastors at times. Oh, what a great job that is that you have. How rewarding that must be to go out there and save all those souls. I don't save anybody's souls. That's not my job. Dude named Jesus took care of that a couple thousand years ago on a cross. My job is to walk with people through what is, if it's not the ugliest time in their life, it's the result of the ugliest time in their life, and let them know that God loves them. And so do I. So I really don't care why they're there. We get these levels of acceptance, and I'm bad, but I'm not as bad as him. Okay. And I guess that's supposed to make me feel better if I'm better than him, but I'm not better than anybody. I don't make any secret of the fact that I am a convicted felon, that I was on paper for 37 years. Another of the first comments that I got from a guy inside was, after saying that, was, yeah, it's not like you killed somebody or something. As a matter of fact, it is. I made 2 young boys orphans, and I made a wife a widow. alcohol and drugs, driving a vehicle, way too fast, place it shouldn't have been. Leo talked about that just a little while ago. I carry that with me every day. People ask why I wanted to do what I do. That's why. I'm the same guy now that I was 50 years ago. But I'm on the other side of some of the consequences, the choices that I made. One of the things that I like to share, and then I'll, I guess, throw this open to questions. The facility that I was in Colorado was like most government buildings. And back in those days, well, much like even now, as I'm sure Leo can attest, it's done by the lowest bidder. Well, they had tunnels underground so you could move to places without getting in the snow and in the weather. And well, in these tunnels, you know, this one from this building and this from this building, they come together. Except they didn't. They actually came together like this. So there was this jog between two tunnels. And we called it the dead zone. And that was long before the movie. Because there was no line of sight, there was no audio or video surveillance in that little corner. So if something hinky was going to happen, that's where it would happen. So one of the COs comes to get me on a morning when I really don't have any place to be. He said, "Come on, you're going with me, you got a hearing." So we went down into the tunnel. It's a nice sunshiny day, but we went into the tunnel. And we got to the dead zone and we stopped there. There was no hearing. Rusty said, "I want you to know that Chuck Baker was a friend of mine. That was the man that I killed." He said, "And I had my mind made up before you came here that it wasn't an accident. And furthermore, I had my mind made up that you weren't either." And he told me that in this place where nobody else knew what was going on. And I started to tremble. And you hear people say when they face death, their life flashes in front of them. That didn't happen to me. But I expected that this was probably it. He said, "But I've gotten to know you since you've been here. And you're not that guy. I believe that it was an accident. And my faith tells me that I have to forgive you. And further, my faith tells me that I have to tell you that I forgive you." And that was my first taste of grace. There's no way I deserved his forgiveness, but he gave it. There's no way I deserved God's forgiveness, but God, as Christ Jesus, gave it to me. Nothing I could do to earn it, deserve it, buy it, make a deal for it. It was a gift. That's the message I carry to the people in Montana State Prison. That's the message I carry to you. I love what I do. I can say a lot of things about it, but the thing I have to say the most is thanks be to God. Amen.
Go.
I think it would be of interest for the audience to hear the internal structure of the prison. There's a high side, low side. How do you get one? How do you get placement in one? How do you get placement in the other? Can you move from one to the other? And what's your role in that kind of thing?
Well, Montana State Prison is kind of unique. Many prisons in the country are single level. We got Supermax in Colorado. We have a medium security prison here, a minimum security prison there, the ones they call the golf club prisons sometimes. Montana State Prison is all the different levels. We have everything from guys who are in max level 3, who are inside their house, their cell, 23 out of every 24 hours. When they're out of their cell, they have all the gangsta bling. They got ankle chains, and they got belly chains, and they got handcuffs. All the way down to guys at the work door who get up in the morning, go to breakfast, get the keys to a pickup and a knife, and go to work. Some of them miles away from the prison. We have, I haven't seen him in a couple of years, but I assume we still have, a lifer who will never get out, who gets the keys to a pickup and leaves every morning. And comes back every evening because it's home. There are all kinds of levels between there. You can go from the max level, then we have the high side. Everybody dresses in khaki. And that's high and high medium security inmates. They have a very structured routine. They get out of their house into a common area. If they leave their building, they have escorts everywhere they go. Across the double fence from that, we have the low side. These guys wear blue. They move around with a little more freedom. They dormitory style housing. They can leave and without ever leaving their unit, go out into the yard and sit in the sun, sit at picnic tables, move around. And when it's chow time, they go up to the chow hall and back. They don't need an escort for that. They get called out and they can go on their own pretty much anywhere within the low side. We have fish, I talked about that. That's the intake unit, the new people. We got the work dorm, the work release center, which is to the west of the prison proper, and that's dormitory housing there. Right across the road from one of the biggest work release things is our dairy. We've got a ranch. Some of them work in the kitchen, in food prep. Some work in the auto shop. Some work in the printing shop, which makes all of your license plates, makes all the signs you see on the highway as you're going somewhere. And then we now have the treatment center, which is out further west and north of the prison, where we've moved our ITU treatment tube from inside to make more room for beds, or for guys to make more beds inside. I guess my involvement in that is, it starts at Fish when I meet people who first come in. Every Wednesday night, I do a worship service. Worship begins with confession and forgiveness, group confession. We're not individual, and we're not confessing to each other, we confess to God. We're broken and we can't fix ourselves. Every worship service includes Holy Communion. And that's on Wednesday night. Last night was high side. Next Wednesday will be low side. It alternates back and forth. I also do about once a month a worship service in the chapel, the Religious Activities Center, on Sunday morning at 7:30 for the low side, at 8:45 for the high side. I do a worship service about once a month at the Work Release Center. I do a worship service about once a month out at the Treatment Center. I do study groups on Tuesday for the low side, on Wednesday for the high side, on Thursday for the work dorm, and on Friday for the treatment center. I do pastoral visits. People come to my office, or if, like, for example, if they're in Fish or they're out at the work dorm or out at the treatment center, I go to them 5 days a week. I'm on call 24/7. And my involvement in their lives is as a friend. They're a Christian friend. I'm also their pastor, their counselor. I kind of freaked one day when somebody referred to me as a mental health professional who's part of the mental health team. But I sometimes get calls from the mental health department saying, he's melting down. Go talk to him. More often they come to me at my office. The average stay at Montana State Prison is 2.8 years. So, and that's, so 80% of the guys that are in Montana State Prison right now, today, will be out on the street within 3 years. They'll be flipping your burgers at McDonald's. They'll be taking your change at the gas station when you stop to fill up. I'd like to think they'll be the people that you contract to build your house, and, you know, but sadly, most of them wind up in these low, we were talking about that earlier, low-paying, entry-level jobs. And really, that's sad when you deal with somebody who's got a doctorate in psychology, and he knows the only job he's going to get is as a line cook in a restaurant. Does that answer your question? Okay, so,
No, sir, how does the prison in Shelby fit into our system, or doesn't?
Shelby is a regional. Shelby is a privately owned prison facility. But it all falls under the Department of Corrections. So inmates move from Montana State Prison to Crossroads at Shelby, to Cascade County, to Glendive, to Gallup. There are other regional facilities. And several county facilities have built and expanded to make beds available for state prisoners who move around, federal prisoners and some of them. But it's all under the umbrella of the Department of Corrections. But Montana State Prison is not a part of Shelby, and Shelby is not a part of Montana State Prison. Does that make sense? Okay.
Don?
Hi, Rob. My name's John. I won't go there. My question is, talk about the educational opportunities in the prison, and what can we do? Our college is just 40 minutes away. What can our students do to engage and help?
Educational opportunities are there. The vast majority of people there take advantage of it to get their high set because they are high school dropouts. So we used to call it the GED, now it's high set. That's probably the greatest part of it. We used to be certified to turn out mechanics who were SAE certified. Toyota was a part of that. There were a couple of, they're no longer a part of it. We still have the mechanics shop, but the certification isn't there anymore. Welding shop, we still, I think, are able to turn out certifications. We have university classes available. One of the guys in my group has gotten, in the time of 7 years that I've been there, has earned 2 and is working on a 3rd bachelor's degree. So there are opportunities, but I bring in, this is going to sound off the subject, it isn't. I bring in Bibles. The Bible that I bring in, the most requested Bible inside Montana State Prison, is called Free on the Inside, the New International Reader's Version. And it's translated at a 4th grade reading level. That's why it's so popular. Because a good percentage of the people in there are illiterate. What could students from Carroll do? I love that question. Getting involved. When you decide you're going to come and visit, I invite you all to drop in and visit. Come to a worship service. Drop in for a study group. Except it's not just as easy as, hi Rob, I'm coming, I'll see you in an hour. I need to know 2 weeks ahead of time. I'm going to need all your personal information because we're going to do a deep background check on you. You have to know that when you come inside, you are subject to search, up to and including a strip search. It hasn't happened in the 7.5 years I've been there, but it's still on the table as a possibility. Those are the things you're going to have to go through just to come inside. What does that mean to the guys inside? If you're willing to go through that, to get inside, to come in and sit down at worship service next to somebody touch them, engage with them. Let them know that you give a rip. That means more to them than just about anything that we can give. I was told years ago at the seminary that I needed to stop hugging people because I'm a hugger. And they told me that if I continued to hug people, I was going to end up in prison. Well, here I am. If you read all the directives and the policies and the procedures, you're not supposed to do that. But I watch as someone who has, well, okay, again, backing up, 67%, 2/3 of the guys that are in Montana State Prison have nobody on their visitation list. Nobody calls them, nobody writes to them. In most cases, in that group, their families have cut them off. They're alone. Watch the look on their face when somebody hugs them and lets them hug back. Is just wow. That's the way I think that probably they can be most helpful. And be aware that, like I said, within 3 years, virtually all of them are going to be back out. One of my guys get out, they are convinced, every one of them, that they got a big red C right in the middle of their forehead. Convict. It's not true. They believe when they go to Devan supermarket and walk down the aisle that everybody there looks at them and knows they just got out. It's not true. Nobody really knows. But for them, that's their truth. That's their reality. We were talking earlier. I've been a part of a movement called Ban the Box for the last 2.5 decades. The box is that little square on a job application or a resume that says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? I spent much of my early life in the boardroom, in the corporate world. I guarantee you, as a personnel and human resources officer, every one of those that's got a check mark is going in this file, and they're never seen again. So I've worked to remove that box because we have guys coming out who are immensely qualified to do the jobs that you need filled. We even have tax incentives for you to hire them. But if they can't get past that box to an interview, it's out of the water. Yes?
I feel like you're holding back. So I'd like to know, America's an amazing country. A lot of the inventions in the world come out of this country. How, in your mind, a country like us have such a high percent of our population incarcerated? What is your opinion and your experience? Why do you think that?
I hate it. I have a real passionate dislike for private prisons. They can call themselves nonprofit, but anytime your source of income depends on warehousing human beings, there's always the potential for scam. I shudder when I realize that 26% is the figure of those of our brothers and sisters, our fellow Americans, who are incarcerated in local, county, state, and federal detention centers. We have more people incarcerated in the United States than something like the top 7 other countries in the world. I don't know that I have another answer, but like I said about the DUIs, what we're doing isn't working. I spent some time earlier this week with Bishop Manong from the Cape Orange Diocese of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in South Africa. And I took him on a brief thumbnail tour of the prison, and we talked about prison ministry, and then they described prison life there. And it's a whole lot different thing. It's more like hospitals were, 2,000 years ago in around the Mediterranean. The family comes in and cares for their inmate. If you're going to have, good meals, your family's going to cook them. But what amazed me about it was the numbers. He told me that in the Cape Orange Diocese of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of South Africa, in that state, less than 1% of the population of the state was incarcerated. What do I think of it? Like I said, I think it sucks. Because it's evidence of a culture that's failing. Again, nationwide, in the United States, 1.01% of our population are Native American. In Montana, 6.38, I think, % of our population are Native American. In Montana State Prison, 29 point something was the last figure I saw, % of our population is Native American. We tend to be a throwaway society. When somebody does something that scares us or offends us or just ethically repulses us, we put them away and we want them to stay there. That's another story, and we're running out of time, but I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, when you said society's broke, but by all indications it's not. I mean, still, all the innovations are coming from this country, so it's not broke, but there's something missing that we're having such a large % of our population that's being incarcerated. There's something missing. I don't know if anybody knows the answer. I just wonder if you do.
I think what's missing is compassion, is genuine care. That's genuine care and concern for the well-being of the other, someone other than ourselves. One of the reasons that this country has produced so much in technological advances and inventions is our capitalistic system, which is at the root of what you're talking about, because most of that only works if the only function of our society is to make money for ourselves. Jesus came and talked about the I, me, mine generation, and talked about agape love. In fact, every time in the New Testament that you see Jesus and love in the same sentence in English, it's agape, except for one, and that's phileo, that's brotherly love. Agape love is genuine care and concern for the well-being of someone else, other than ourselves. I think at the root of it, that's where the problem lies. We can put people there and then forget that they're there because we don't encounter them every day. We don't have to interact with them every day. Out of sight, out of mind. I don't know if I'm getting at your question.
No, what's a better answer than video games?
Yeah, my youngest son is autistic. He networks 5 different computer systems, gaming systems together on the internet, and plays video games and teaches people strategy and how to play these games in 5 or 6 different countries on 3 different continents. But when we told him that we'd like him to go to Montana Tech and get a teaching certificate, he said, I can't teach. I'm just helping.